Good morning, and thank you all for coming this morning. I'm Dolly Sandoval, and I work on behalf of Applied Wisdom through the Morgan Family Foundation. And before we get started on our program this morning, first I want to welcome you to Create TV, which is our great studio
It's
downtown.
Such a wonderful.
And how many of you are here for the very first time?
Oh,
Well, that's
great.
excellent because I'm proud to tell you a little bit about Jim Morgan. Jim is an influential philanthropic and nonprofit leader based here in Silicon Valley. He's worked extensively in the worlds of both high-tech industry, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. Jim led the semiconductor equipment giant Applied Materials, and he was the CEO there for nearly 30 years. Under his leadership, that became a Fortune 500 company. Jim built an extremely diverse workforce with top engineers, both men and women, representing many backgrounds and ethnicities. After his work at Applied Material and towards the tail end, Jim and his wife, former state senator Becky Morgan, started getting involved in different nonprofits. The Nature Conservancy is one of them, helping to co-found the Sierra Partnership Network. Northern Sierra Partnership is another. He turned to leadership potential and how do we address the issues of the future during this time. And of course, you all know Supervisor Cindy Chavez because she is involved in everything.
Hey, everybody knows her.
Cindy is the
Well done, Dolly.
current Santa Clara County Supervisor representing, of course, this region. She's led the county and the state on a number of important issues that directly impact positively our community, whether it's children's health care, building a transportation system amongst VTA, Caltrain, and MTC, or addressing the fentanyl crisis that we're all seeing in our young population at the moment, amongst a number of other issues. Cindy has been on the front lines. How has she achieved this? Well, first, she has incredible energy, as you all know. But she also has a unique ability to bring people of various backgrounds together to sit down at the table and roll up their sleeves and make solutions occur. In this vein, both she and Jim are very similar. They actively encourage leadership growth, and they seek potential in each and every one of us and everyone we work with. So they both have been working to bring a positive change in our community. So without further ado, Cindy Chavez and Jim Morgan.
Thank you. So first of all, I am delighted to see so many friends here today. And I wanted to say a little bit about how we ended up having this conversation. How many of you have had an opportunity to read this book already? Oh, you've got a lot of fans. So what I was sharing with Dolly and Kathleen King was that I grabbed this book and we used it. We actually gave, thank you to you, about 1,000 of these out at a women's summit. And prior to the summit, I had a chance to read it. And I was having one of those days, and I know this happens to all of you, where you are stuck with a problem that you're trying to process how you're going to solve, who you're going to bring around the table. And I happened to be looking at this book, and I told our mutual friend Kathleen, I said, you know what would be a dream? I'd love to talk to Jim Morgan directly. So you're my dream today. So, and all of us are going to get to benefit at the same time. So think about your thoughts and questions as well. So I wanted to just start off by asking a pretty basic question about what made you write the book and how you hope people will use it.
Well, there's a little longer story than you really want to hear, but I'll try to keep it short. So I retired, and years ago, actually when I was in ROTC at Fort Bragg summer camp, had to take a leadership course one week there. And I got this little card, and it had leadership traits and principles on it. And you could put it in your wallet, and then it had the Army mission and some other things. And I just kept that, and stuck it in a file, and then after that, I took ideas like that I came across and stuck them in a file. So then when I was retiring, I thought, well, I better get a little bit of a 3-ring notebook for the grandkids. We have 5 of them, fortunately, and so I started that, and my friends knew that I had these tips that I used in day-to-day management process at Applied, and so and then they started joking about them. Oh, another organism. You mean oh, another one? Good news is bad news, good news, no news. Well, it's something like that. But they all remembered them, and so they got to be a thing. So my friends all said you have to include it in whatever you write. So I did, and that was turned out to be this book, which says Applied Wisdom, Bad News is Good News, and Other Insights that can help anyone be a better manager. And so I published that, and as a result, our foundation head, some of you may know her, Linda Rotham. And so Linda said, Jim, you need to write a booklet. We need to. Because there isn't anything that people aren't going to read these kind of things, which is all you have. So we did this, and it just took off. And so we have, it's about 47,000 of these booklets out around the world in about 47 countries and 2 in every state. Because it's just a void of stuff. So as a result, then later, in addition, you can find this on the website. And this is 100 tips that I collected that the fella that helped me self-publish organized. So it makes a great reference book. And you can get any of those, download them, get hard copies at no charge. So you're welcome to that. That's a little bit longer than you'd like to know, but
No, it's helpful.
then
Thank you.
these 8 came out.
Well, and what I love about this is that I know that, and I got that too. I got a signed copy. I was all excited, and I am reading it. So, but what I liked about this one when I saw it is that for all of you who run organizations, while the title may be you manage, you really are leading. And I like that this in the title actually acknowledges your leadership, all of your leadership. So I'm going to start with my first question, and this was actually the one that prompted me to say, I want to have a conversation with you. And that is, the bad news is good news. And, I know a lot of us are thinking right now about the fact that for a lot of our organizations, the state's in trouble, which means, our nonprofits.
Everybody's going to be in trouble.
That's right, right. And so we're thinking about budgets. I know for a lot of organizations, they're thinking about the demographics of their workforce. I mean, one of the things I'm really mindful of at the county is that some of these strong, amazing leaders that we've had are getting ready to retire. And we don't see as many young people coming into the workforce, and certainly into, and I'm sure this is true for all of you, into the nonprofit world and into the public sector. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the theory behind bad news is good news, and then help us get there. No pressure.
Well, I grew up on a farm and in a family cannery, sweet corn, green beans, and I ran different parts of it when I was a teenager. You had the canning room, and you had the corn shed, and the boxing room, and so forth. And what I realized was that if there was a problem developing, you could usually tell it by sound. And so I knew that I had to, particularly on the most sophisticated equipment, the fellow from Continental Can Company that was a service person would come and help fix it. So you'd hear a sound at, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If you could get it nursed through till 10, and you called him early on. He'd show up sometime between then and morning and call me and get me out of bed, and I'd go over and we'd fix it. And in all those years, I never failed to see the cannery start. And it's a one-line cannery, so if one thing stops, it may mean the whole thing stopped. And so I never saw that fail to start at 7 o'clock. So that became of course, then I'd tell that story to the service people and say, so they knew absolutely they had total responsibility to get the customer operating. And so they'd have somebody on an airplane headed for Japan or Germany or the East Coast, and they had the responsibility. So that became a culture that really helped make Applied successful.
And by hearing the sound, meaning that you see something and then you're prepared to take action. And what you just said that is really very powerful and striking to me is that there's another person who's responsible and helping them understand that responsibility and having expectations that we're all responsible for dealing with the sound, noise.
And different, if you, whatever it is that you have the responsibility for, you keep the monkey. I mean, you don't call your boss and say you got a monkey I need you to take care of.
That's awesome.
That's
going to be a Cindyism.
That's what they like. That's what they do. You can see them coming down the hall, and the monkey's there. You bring that monkey right in, they rub it a little bit, and you give a couple peanuts, and you just keep your hand on there, and you make sure when this person turns around, the monkey goes too. Otherwise, 7 o'clock in the morning, they'll be wondering how the monkey's who's taking care of it.
That's a really great point. Do you see from your work, because I know you've been really involved in nonprofits and in the business community, what are the biggest similarities that you see between nonprofit leadership and business leadership?
I think, in most cases, if you put the problem up on a whiteboard and don't tell which it is and just make a kind of a generic comment, you can't tell the difference.
That is really important.
I mean, nonprofit people say that, business people can't understand, but part of that may be you haven't got the right nonprofit or right for-profit people. Because Becky had a person that helped her raise money years ago, and she made the comment one day about business people on nonprofits. And she said, Becky, some reason they seem to leave their brains at the door. Now, I don't know whether that's true for any years, but we really believe that business people should participate, particularly with their operations and their different experiences that they have to help the nonprofit be operationally and successful. And understand you need to be sure you have a few months of runway before you aren't too far out over your skis. Just a lot of those things that business people deal with, and and nonprofits have to deal with, and government has to deal with. Of course, government may be a nonprofit, but sometimes, but
That's what it feels like.
That's just we can follow up on that if you have some other questions. Huh?
That's an excellent point. Could you talk, all of us here hire people and think a lot about how who we hire both impacts culture, vision, but could you talk a little bit about how you pulled such a talented team together to really build Applied up? And really part of the reason I'm thinking about this for all of us is just that hiring is probably one of the most important things that we do. So I'd love your tips and thoughts on that.
Well, I never discount luck.
Great point.
So my wife says I have a parking angel when it comes down to it. And I say, well, you just have to be nice to her. She's, so, but anyway, we did several things. One, it was as a small company, and actually we were essentially bankrupt in '76 and '77. But then we then started to look around, and I got a good HR person, and he found a couple good people. He came from Johnson & Johnson, and they had good HR that I knew then. We began to look overseas also. We'd get some of the best technical people because they were interested in the industry, or the beginning of the industry. So it was an opportune time for people. So we'd get a few of them in. Each of us in the company had the requirement that we keep 3 people on our hiring list. And then when we got one of them, we couldn't get them, we're never going to get them or something, we'd drop them and add another one. And how that worked, Mike Splinter, who became the CEO after me, came from Intel, and he was on my list since 1984.
Wow.
And I turned over the reins in 2003.
Wow.
But that was true at all levels. The shop, the techs, sales, different ways. So that was kind of one thing that was helpful. Then in looking for people, we would, once we'd identify them, then we would do a very thorough research. And we had kind of a rule that you had to find at least 2 negatives that you could live with. And before you finished because what tends to happen if you're hiring you're doing a search firm, of course their objective is to get on to the next search to get another payment.
Right.
So you may not get a total safe thing. And once you kind of get somebody you like, you can kind of sell yourself on them. So we just had this guideline that we tried to use, and that helped some. And we always use local people. I don't know, did any of you know Glenn Toney? He did corporate HR and corporate things in the 80s, and he came from he came from the school board, Palo Alto School, but not school board, school. He's assistant superintendent, and he was kind of our cultural guideline. And so he made sure we had a multicultural workforce. And of course, since we were overseas also, we always put the person who's running, say, Japan, Iwasaki-san, the first one, and in Korea, YI, and different ones, always were local. And then the number 2 person might be an American that would back them up, or from England or something. But we always had the local, and so, in fact, we got together. One of our executives in that time was Ashok Sinha, if any of you know him. He was an Indian from India, and he had us over to watch a movie, and there were 8 of us, and we took a picture of us. Well, all 8 of us were different cultures. It was Ishi-san, and he actually ran HR at Applied for 6 or 7 years after being number 2 in Japan for, I don't know, 15 years. So anyway, that's kind of a long story, but it kind of has several flavors to it that you might pick an idea that would help you.
That's wonderful. I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I know Dolly wants to come and get us with have a little conversation. Right now it does feel like for so many of our organizations that there's kind of a lot coming at them, and I think when you're a nonprofit leader, it always feels like there's a lot coming at you, and I'm sure that's true as a business leader too. And certainly, as you know, politics is a bit of a contact sport, so I can relate to that a bit, as I'm sure Senator Morgan can as well. But one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is how we keep teams together in environments that are so dynamic. And now it feels like there's a kind of a global dynamic of unrest, local unrest. I think we can all really feel that. And I was at an event yesterday where we were talking about a new approach to how we're going to do prevention work. And one of the people that was there, I asked her, "What did you think of the experience you had today?" And she said, "It's fine, but I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I'm having a hard time seeing the hope. I'm so angry."
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how, as a leader, did you keep your teams together and focused and pushing forward?
Well, I don't remember things quite like this in the political world and or the business world within companies. I always, like you and Becky, you've all both been collaborative, and that kind of began to disappear about the time she got off of the California State Senate. The Republican Party was going more, which she was, a Vermont Republican, and which is a moderate type of, or as they began to say, a rhino. And then, and they worked together. Willie Brown got Becky the last vote for the train. I mean, it's just, we can't even hardly think about something like that today, but that happened. And so it's sad, and I think it starts with the local groups. We keep wanting a leader that's going to do all this for us, but that's pretty hard to do unless the support is built from the base up. And so unless you and your different political cultures are willing to look at each other more equally and collaborate, it's going to be hard to change. And that works also in a company, not that it has some politics, but not outside politics particularly. But collaboration, which we talk about some in the booklets, is really an important thing to have thought through. And there's some tips in here. I would usually give a commentary at the Engineering Technology Conference. And we had it up in Banff one time. And so what I did was have a formula, because they were all engineers. So I had this formula of 5. And so then somebody says, "Well, Jim, you need one more." So we came up with 6. So Anyway, those are some of the things that are listed in here, and that you just had the idea of collaboration, and you just have to keep trying different ways to have people try it, because it'll work. It's just you got to get some confidence in it.
I will say, my observation, having lived here for 40 years now, is that in many respects, we are a very rare community in that I think collaboration at a local level is still a very high culture. And I think what's interesting is that the tech community is as vibrant and aggressive and all of the other characteristics that it has, it still has always had at its root this very collaborative model.
Yeah.
And I think that's been part of our regional culture.
Right.
And I know engaging in public policy discussions in other parts of the country that people are always surprised that we still talk to each other. I too worry that even locally that we're losing that somehow collaboration seems like a weakness instead of a strength. And and I will say, but my own experience is that it's much harder to collaborate than just to be to bully your way through.
Right.
I think it's better in the long run, but it definitely feels like with the dominant culture, and I think politically, having had a president that yells and screams and intimidates people. One of the funniest things I remember thinking was, I never imagined I would see the President of the United States. Well, there were so many things I didn't imagine there. Let me stop there. But one was, I remember when he engaged in a debate, really trying to bully a young woman named Greta Thunberg.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I never imagined having the representative of the United States, a grown man, attacking a child, literally a child. And what does that teach people? Because I do think leaders build cultures that other people
Follow.
imitate and follow. So the role that you all have and the role that you've played in our region has been incredible, because not only did you lead with a culture of collaboration, but also just the incredible generosity that you and Senator Morgan have had in our community has also been a model for other business leaders to invest in our community. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that.
Well, Dave Packard was very active, for those of you that don't know him, but he was on the Palo Alto School Board. He started the Manufacturers Association, just a lot of things made a difference.
It really did. When you think about the roots of that kind of leadership and collaboration, what you see is, as BART's coming down, that was however many years ago that started, but it laid the groundwork for all these good things to happen in our community. So, Dolly, we're ready for you.
Great. We're going to shift gears for a moment, but first of all, thank you for this discussion so far. We'll have time for questions and answers in a few minutes. But speaking of collaboration, I think this region really is different than most of the United States and likely most of the world. As a former community college trustee and former council member, whenever I would go to conferences, they'd say, oh, you have such and such company in your backyard helping you. Whether it was Cisco or Applied Materials or Apple helping to fund our nonprofits, both physically and financially, has been really a source of help to us, particularly in the nonprofit world. And on collaboration, I think it's been most important over the years, particularly with COVID, right? When the sky was falling, and each one of you had to pivot on how you did work in the community. For example, people could not come to West Valley Community Services and pick up their food baskets, go shopping through the market like they can now. When you have counselors in school having to socially distance from students and wear masks, and it's just harder to read body language and facial expressions. When you have the Silicon Valley Leadership Group trying to pull people together, and yet doing it on Zoom, which, by the way, as a former teacher, And somebody who has served on a number of nonprofit boards, Zoom was something I did between the restroom and my classroom, for 20 seconds. So it was different for all of us, and we all pivoted. And yet we still also know that we're never going to be free of challenges. So one of the things that I take a look at, particularly in the nonprofit world, is court sense. Like, what is going on in the world that impacts the organization I'm working with, and how can I broaden my court sense, and how can I actually figure out what are the trends going on, and who can help me meet whatever that nonprofit's mission is. So one of the things I like about the Applied Wisdom book, Jim, frankly, is at the end of each of these little insights, which, as you know, are only 2 to 3 pages long, there's several sets of questions. So that you have to get out of your role, or I suggest at least, you get out of your role as the CEO, as the frontline staff, as the funder, and look at the organization from different points of view. So if we could bring the lights up just a little and talk to your neighbor for a few minutes, we're going to give you a few minutes both to say hi to each other, but also talk about what are you seeing as trends in your industry, and how can you help us and help yourself to strive and do better and collaborate and address our needs. So we're going to give you a few minutes to do that, because I'm really all about making sure that you have some interaction here. And then we'll wrap up a little bit more about Applied Wisdom and with our
questions, yeah.
two folks answering your questions. Yes. Okay? So
you have a little homework.
classwork, really.
That's right, classwork. That's right. The teacher makes it right.
Thank you so much for being so active in your conversations here today. And now what I'd like to do is transition to see how many of you have a question for Cindy and Jim about Applied Wisdom, or really, almost anything else. And so who has a question? I'll hand you the mic. Or if actually, why don't you come up to the front here? That would be great. Thank you, Nicole.
Hi, Jim, Cindy. My name is Nicole Kim. I'm the incoming executive director for College of Adaptive Arts. Yay. And I have thank you. Thank you. I have a 27-year career in the tech industry. And I really
That's how long I was at Applied.
I started later than you.
CEO of Applied.
Wow.
Yeah, I really resonated with your book. I loved it because the wisdom that you provided is how I ran my teams. But what I've found over my career is that management wasn't always aligned with me. And a lot of times I would get pushed to the side because I was too empathetic. And so my question is, did you ever experience any pushback from your managers or your leaders who disagreed with your philosophies?
What a great
And how did you deal with it?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I'm sure there were.
They never told you.
Yeah, well, no, they gave me a pretty straight feedback most of the time. We tended, I guess part of it is we tended to make collective decisions pretty quickly. And then we got the culture started early. Cindy and I were just talking about, was to get in the habit of making a decision. Get enough information to make a decision, but make the decision as soon as you possibly can, and then manage the consequences. Because usually, what we found is that we could fix anything. I mean, once we weren't going to go bankrupt, and that wasn't for sure right away, but then we were going to survive somehow. So because of that, we got in the habit of making decisions and then managing the consequences. And that became a culture. I learned that there's a little bit of that discussion. It's probably in here, but also in here, and specifically at Cornell, because in statistics, in business school, I took a course that the teacher got this point across that you should make a decision, the cost of perfect information, and then we tied that in to make a decision and manage the consequences. So that became a culture that enabled us to make decisions fairly quickly, but manage the consequences if it was wrong. And the other thing was getting information to flow within the company. And I guess it did pretty well because Dr. Maiden, who was eventually became our president, but he was kind of my technical partner from early September 1980 until he retired. And we have lunch every 3 times or 4 times a year. And so we were talking about, was there a time when there was a bad news that went to the San Jose Mercury or our board or Wall Street that one of us didn't know? And we thought about it pretty hard. I don't know quite why we got on that, but neither of us could think of one time when not only didn't one of us know, but both of us knew. So at least that, from that perspective, the idea of information availability and accurate good, bad news floating, so was a culture that evolved pretty quickly in the company. I mean, pretty early in the company.
Thank you, and congratulations, Nicole.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to do instead of just hold the mic? Have a couple of you come up. They'd like you to be sort of on camera this way when they ask you your questions. This is new for me, so come on up, Nisa.
Thank you, Dolly. Hi, everybody. Nisa Flagger, right here? Okay. Thank you. So hi, Nisa Flagger, Los Altos City Council member. And like many of us, I wear many hats. So I'm here as a council member. Also, I work at HP. So a lot of what you're saying, Jim, resonates with me as the HP way. And I serve on boards. I have a couple colleagues on my nonprofit boards here as well. First, I do want to thank you for your remarkable journey in leadership, Jim. And also, Cindy, thank you for your leadership. I think someone defined you earlier as a bridge builder, thank you. And a couple of us standing next to her said that's exactly right, so thank you. My question has to do with change. So wearing these different hats, of course, I see change happening at HP. You know, in every meeting it's talking about AI, at the nonprofit board level, at city council, there's a lot of change. And of course, change is constant. And I'm curious, Jim, in your 27-year experience, how do you encourage your employees and staff to embrace change? Especially, I'm an attorney, and we're moving forward with a lot of legal automation, and just especially mid-level and our senior staff, to get them to really embrace automation. We know a lot of people feel safe in where they are, and they're scared about change. So I'd really appreciate your thoughts on that.
Well, I think one of them is what's his name? Bridges model. It's some of you may have seen it. He's a researcher. He's a psychological consultant, and he has these phases that you go through with change. So that's one aspect of it, is to have appreciation for where that people do go through these phases, whether it's a divorce or a company change, or you lose your job, or whatever it is. And so that you have to make sure as the executive or the management around the process that you understand the collective psychology and that you understand somewhat each person's, because there are going to be different stages. Each of the people, let's say there's 5 people and this one thing is being affected by it, they'll be in different places potentially. So that's the thing. And then the other thing is try to build a culture, which we said that change was a mode of opportunity. Almost, that wasn't quite the quote. Anyways, that's the essence of it. That change is a way of opportunity. And so if you kind of put those two things together, it built a culture that worked for us anyway, for change. And we just were used to change. I mean, in other words, because in our business, sometimes the bookings went up. Well, we never made a bookings forecast. So that tells you something.
Yeah, it does.
So we may have been up 45%, or we may have been down 25% from the plan, but we never were on the plan. Because the bookings, that is, we could monitor the sales, but the bookings moved around a lot. And so you just had to build out cultural support for that. And we were able to do that, so we would, there's a thing in there that calls about the elevator, face the elevator door. So whenever things were good, we'd be busy getting the finances in straight, getting all our technology straight. And then when we went into that downturn, we would sometimes have to cut some costs. We generally accelerated our technical work, so move our products forward faster, stuff like that. But then as soon as we began coming out of that, we had 2 or 3 people that were working on the next downturn. So people got comfortable, and we didn't lose many people because they panicked. We did weed some out to keep it strong, but.
Thank you. Is there another question? I think we have time for one more question. Yes, come on up, Sarita.
Thank you, Jim and Cindy. My question was that a lot of nonprofit leaders particularly, and some business leaders too, but nonprofit leaders are, the boomer generation or Gen Xers, but having to run organizations that are often staffed by the Gen Z and the millennial generation that have experienced the world in very, very different ways. And those of us who are in those older generations, we're not as savvy with technology and all the changes that are happening in the world. What advice do you have for leaders to be able to be effective with the workforce of today?
That's a tough one since I haven't had to do that. I bailed out. That's one thing you can do. But it's. I think one thing is that don't lose confidence in yourself, because you do have seasoning that it can't be replaced, and they may not think so. But it's true, and you need to keep that self-belief. And then the question is how do you be effective with the situation you have? And I would look for things that you want to get done and prioritize them so you don't try to do everything. So priority is always a big big thing with me. I think the other thing is that when they find a couple or three that you relate to and get to understand pretty well, and try to introduce some of your things that you're trying to do through them to start. It's really hard anytime, and I never tried to do it, to try to get everybody on the same page. And there's so much pressure to do that, but it's kind of, I think, foolish, because they aren't going to be on, going back to the Briggs model, they're going to be in different places. So what do you do? One of the things, being a farm boy, I'd look for a bell cow. And so you get somebody, those of you maybe haven't had that experience, the bell cow is one that has a bell, and when you call her, she'll come and bring all the rest of them with her. So anyway, you don't have to use that word, you may get a better word. But that works, you know, and you'll find, since everybody's pretty competitive in these ranks, they'll start following.
Thank you. Great.
It's just one way.
That's awesome.
Sometimes I suspect all of you are bell cows, right? And Teresa, why don't you come up for the last question?
Great, thank you. I like that last question, and I kind of want to add something to that while also thanking you for writing this book. I'm a chief people officer for a public agency, and I would say more than 50% of our organization is millennial. And when I think about ways that we can impart knowledge that is leaving industry and not being shared because they're not sitting at our feet anymore. They're a high-put generation, high-input generation, always seeking information, not necessarily from us. I take them through the pyramid of knowledge. The pyramid of knowledge starts with data, that collectively becomes information, that through application and practice becomes knowledge, and over time, at the top of the pyramid is wisdom. So I want to thank you for writing this book about applied wisdom, and challenge and charge all of you to try to sit in the seat and walk in the shoes of the younger generation and find ways to connect, because they're in desperate need of relationship. Meet them where they are, walk them through that input journey to apply wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, if I could borrow one of those books on the table, just wanted to remind you that inside each book is my card, and I would have put Kathleen's card in here this morning, but she fell ill. So if you want to connect with us more about applied wisdom, please do send me an email. There's also a collection of management tips. You can start writing down your own tips, and I'm going to steal the seasoned one, because that's great. And there's QR codes everywhere. We have a full assembly for applied wisdom material, course information, etc. online. And Kathleen and I would be more than happy to talk you through this again, how to kick this off with your different organizations. If you have somebody I should connect with, please, please, please send me an email. And then Jim, thank you for your wisdom. And as many of you know, all these materials are free of cost because the Morgan Family Foundation has decided building leadership capacity is necessary for our community well-being. And Cindy, thank you again just for your wisdom and bringing us all together. So before we thank them, we also will have a camera going in a few minutes. If any of you want to go on camera and just state your reactions to what you heard today, the tech team here at Creativity TV will help you do that. And again, my heart goes out to the staff behind the cameras, behind that wall.
Thank you.
And to our host, Chad. Thank you very much.
Thank you.